Welcome to episode 64 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on July 30th, 2021. Today we are wrapping up our I-91 shop hop yarn crawl with visits to Webb's, Hand Knits, and Green Mountain Spinnery. I also have some news for you that I think you're going to want to hear, and a giveaway, this time from Green Mountain Spinnery. Let's get going, my friends. Thank you to everyone who went over to rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts this last week, and special thanks to Knitwords and Gail Knits for your kind comments. Leaving a review anywhere helps the show become more visible to others, so thank you for that, really. You guys are great. As I said at the start of the show, we are finishing our shop hop today with a visit to 3 stores. In reality, my third day of my hop was 4 shops because it included Northampton Wools, but I explained in the last episode why that one got shifted. We are starting the tour in Northampton, Massachusetts today, and after visiting Webb's, we will hop on the highway and head north to Brattleboro, Vermont. If you do the tour yourself, along the way, you'll drive through a town called Greenfield, and just next to that town is a smaller town called Turner's Falls, which is where I spent the first 18 years of my life. We are still up in that area pretty regularly because my father and my brothers all still live there. Interstate 91 follows the Connecticut River pretty closely from the Hartford area all the way up into northern Vermont. The Connecticut is a fairly shallow river, so it never really made a good trade route in the early days of the European settlers. Their boats just couldn't navigate up the river. Native Americans would travel along it quite well in canoes, and early settlers used smaller boats on it as well, but the inability to sail the larger ships along the river meant that it stayed in a fairly natural state for a long time. When the mills came to America in the late 1700s, mill towns began to crop up along the Connecticut. While there are mills built directly on the river, most of the mills were powered by water diverted from the river into canals so that mill owners could count on a steady amount of water pressure to power their works. Almost none of the mills are still in industrial use, but you will still see many 3- and 4-story brick buildings along the way. Many of them processed wood into paper or wool into cloth. There were even silk mills. In my hometown, there was a cutlery manufacturer. All sorts of things were made using the power of the Connecticut River in days gone by. Now the buildings have been repurposed into apartments or office buildings or are just continuing to sit abandoned. The mills are one of the architectural constants along the tour, though, so I thought I'd draw your attention to them. I find them fascinating. We are going to begin with a visit to Webb's today. We will start with Webb's and then have a song as we travel north. Then we will visit Hand Knits in Brattleboro, Vermont. After that, it's just a short drive to Putney, Vermont, where Green Mountain Spinnery is almost immediately off the highway. They were kind enough to give us an entire mill tour, which was so informative. At the other end of that, I will pop back in and I will tell you about the giveaway from Green Mountain Spinnery and fill you in on a few things coming up. I'll see you at the end of our hop. Let's get started in Webb's. You guys, I'm in Webb's. Before they opened, I feel like I don't know if those of you who are my age and you grew up watching like Nickelodeon or whatever, and they would have the contest where you could win time in a Toys R Us by yourself. That's sort of what I feel like right now. As I was coming up here, I was trying to figure out how I would convey the size of the shop to you because I'm really bad as far as envisioning square footage. So I thought what I would do is I would start at the front door and work my way through the main store and then through the amazing back room that is open to customers. They call it the warehouse because it is the warehouse. And you're allowed to go back there and poke around. And Webb's is actually a clearinghouse for a lot of different yarns that are being discontinued. If you are looking for a yarn that is no longer easily available, the yarn.com website is a great place to look to try and grab it before it really is all gone. So I am here at the front door, and right now I am going to start to walk sort of casually back towards the back of the shop and the entry to the warehouse, and I'll let you know when I get there. As I'm walking in the middle of the store, there are all sorts of 6-foot tall bookshelf units that house a great deal of yarn, And we'll talk more about that in a bit. And so this whole time I've been talking, I am just now getting to the entry of the warehouse. So if you can imagine sort of a sound picture coming from the door to that point. And now I'm entering into the warehouse and making my way to the back of the warehouse. And the shelving in the back is different. It's more sort of industrial looking, but you have access to all the yarns that are back here. Webb's does a wonderful thing where they will apply a discount to purchases of a certain amount, but a lot of these yarns in the back, because they are closeouts, you'll see the price and then no further discount. So that doesn't count towards the discount that you can get on your yarn, but they're such good deals, you don't need the additional discount. And so here I am now arriving at the back of the warehouse. Now the warehouse is sorted into a series of aisles. The first aisle is all of the Valley yarns. And of course, Webb's has their own yarn line called Valley Yarns. This is known as the Pioneer Valley that Webb's is located in. So a lot of their yarns are named after different towns in the Pioneer Valley. So you have Deerfield, you have Hampton, there's a Northampton one, there's Haydenville, and they're just... For locals, we're delighted by this, to have yarns named after our towns. And then as you move across, it's going from chunky downward. So you have your chunky, you have your worsted. There's also, I should say, Webb's caters to spinners and to weavers as well. So you can get coned yarns here. You get into the DKs and the fingerings. And then on the furthermost wall, I just want to make sure because it has been a few months since I've been here. Yeah, on the furthermost wall, you have the extreme markdowns, I like to think of them. This is always a place that I come look. Spinners, they have a corner back here for you where they have several wheels set up. They have some of the rovings, and also back here sometimes you'll find books and you'll find some tools available both for spinners and for knitters. There's a table here and a nice vending machine where you can have a little snack if you need to too. Webb's is really an experience. I think of it as a Mecca type store that everyone needs to come and see at least once in your life, because they really do have pretty much everything that you can think of. Those who are fans of the last incarnation of Craftsy/Blueprint, Webb's is the clearinghouse for those yarns. So if you need Cloudborne for any of those projects that are still available at Craftsy and you want to use the original yarn that the designer used and they designed using Cloudborne, this is the place where you can find that. Let's go back into the store. Sorry, I just love the warehouse so much. I could talk about all the deals I found at the warehouse. In fact, as my husband was driving me up here, I was working on a sweater and I realized that I'm knitting this sweater with yarn that I got from the warehouse about a year ago. So I'm back in this shop now and coming from out of the warehouse, and some of the things have changed around since last time I was here. This back corner here is really lovely. We have the Malabrigo and the Koigu in this back corner, and just working around you get into all the different brands that are available. They do have some Valley yarns here in the front too, but you'll find Sheepies, Cascade, Barocco, Hayfield, which is new to me, as well as Plymouth, James and Brett, Universal Yarns, a lovely selection of more Koigu, more of the bulky Koigu. I'm sort of in a bulky corner right now. I'm surrounded by Rowan bulky, Valley Yarns Berkshire bulky, which is nice. It's like a Lopi type, Noro, Cascade Koigu. So yeah, the store itself is also organized by size. Towards the front of the shop, as you're imagining this, when you first come in, if you turn to your right, that's where you're going to find all of your needles needs, and it's a wonderful long wall that turns a corner and comes back down. They have Addie's and Knitter's Pride, and when I say they have Knitter's Pride, I mean they have Knitter's Pride. Like they carry the line of Knitter's Pride. You will be able to find it here. There's also, I'm seeing some Lana Grossa needles. I haven't seen those here before. That's pretty cool. But you can imagine with a store this size that they really carry pretty much everything you're going to need to finish up your projects and accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to go find Bonnie, who is the store manager, and ask her some questions. I'm here at the very back. I didn't even know that this room existed. This is like the true back room of Webb's with Bonnie, the store manager. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks for coming in. This is great.
Bonnie, first, can I ask how long you've been with Webb's?
I started out as a retail staff, just part-time, just to get out of the house. Once my kids kind of started growing up, I've been here it'll be 9 years in November. So I've moved up from retail to assistant manager, and now I'm the store manager. Yeah, for the past probably 3 years. It's been 3 years.
Can you give me some of the history of the company?
So Webb's was founded in 1974 by Barbara Elkins and her business partner, Donna Mueller. And it started in the basement weaving, basically. And then they grew and they had a storefront on Main Street in Amherst in 84. Then in 87, they grew even more. They moved to a Victorian house in Amherst on Kellogg Ave. And then it moved to Northampton in 1992. And then Steve and Kathy purchased it from Art and Barbara because they were thinking about retirement in 2002. And it is what we have today. I mean, it's grown, and I think we have about 90 staff. We have the store. We also have a warehouse where all our shipping, receiving, storage of our yarns, and our customer service is at.
And I feel like Webb's is sort of a closeout store also for yarns that are being discontinued. Is that correct?
Correct. Companies will come to Steve, or he will go to companies if he knows yarns are closing out and work and get a really good price. And then we bring it in as closeouts for the store. And that is a huge draw to a lot of customers. But we always tell customers, or I always tell customers, the closeouts are a great deal, but sometimes with our everyday discount of $20 on $60 and $25 on $120, you can actually save just as much, if not more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. Yeah, I love the Webb's discount.
Absolutely. And that's still going to continue because, as a lot of people know, Love Crafts, we're purchased by Love Crafts, and it's an amazing company. Same values of Webb's and Steve and Kathy. It's been a great merge. And Webb's is still going to run as Webb's like it has the past 46 years.
Is there a plan to eventually sort of absorb it under the Love's Craft label, or will it always be just a subsidiary, or however that business term works?
Webb's will always be Webb's.
Okay.
We will not be changing our name. That was a question I had asked when we were purchased. I'm like, so are we going to change our name? And it will be Webb's. Webb's will be Webb's. People know us. Why would you mess with something that has done so well,
Exactly. I mean, you definitely have the brand recognition. I mean, you look at pretty much any festival handout or, anything going on, and Webb's is listed as a sponsor. It's such a great supporter of the community.
Absolutely. You go, when we did the shows, I would travel. We'd go to, New York City. We'd go to Stitches West, Stitches East, Stitches Midwest, and people were always excited to see Webb's.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know among listeners, it's really something where if they are going to be in New England, not even in Massachusetts, if they're going to be in New England, they try and figure out how to get here and see it for themselves.
We have a world map up front, and I just updated the map, made it a little bit bigger, but we had smaller maps, and we literally, in I think about a month and a half, filled all of the states up. At least a pin was in every state. And it was so cool to see how many people come from literally all over the world. Yeah. It's not just New England. They come, and we are a destination.
And you have the 5 colleges in the area too, which brings people to the area. And then, of course, while they're here, they have to come.
And the college students get a 10% discount.
I don't think I knew about that when I was here. That would have been very dangerous for me.
You just need to show us your ID and you get 10% off. But if you hit the discount or it's already on sale, that discount doesn't apply. But, for needles that hardly ever go on sale, notions, things like that, 10%, we want them to keep knitting.
Yeah. Is there anything coming up on the calendar that we should be aware of?
Our 10 sale that usually happens in May, there's talk about it happening in October. So that's kind of exciting. Things are starting to get back to normal. We're looking at starting up drop-in again in the store where people can gather and get their questions answered. Right now it's by schedule. You have to schedule a time. We're looking at doing Rhinebeck, two buses for Rhinebeck. Hopefully that's Beth Zich, our education manager, is working on that.
And that's something you've done in the past too, where local people can get their tickets here and just hop on a bus and not have to worry about parking and driving and everything.
Absolutely. And it's always a good time. We do giveaways on the bus. We try to entertain people and keep them focused and ready to go buy some yarn. Yeah. And we also get sales here throughout, beforehand and after, people who even just drive on their own.
Yeah.
We are looking at fall classes in the fall in store. So things are starting to come back, which is really exciting. It's great seeing people come back in the store. It's just nice to start being normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned classes. I know that you have a program here where people can... It's an alternative to the Master Hand Knitter program offered by the Knitting Guild Association. Can you tell us more about that and how that looks going forward, if that's going to stay online or become just in person, or what the plans are?
So we have an expert knitter program, and you can contact Beth Zich if you're interested. And there are core courses, like you would take any college courses that you have to take to finish the program. And then basically you're designing a sweater and you work with somebody. We have people that sit and work with you through your design elements, maybe choosing a yarn. And then just before graduation, you meet with all of the teachers that have worked with all the different students, and you have a defense. So you basically defend your garment, and then you graduate. So it's pretty neat. That is still on board, whether it was online courses or in store. I think we have 4 or 5 students graduating this year.
Oh, wonderful.
And that actually happens tonight, I believe, is graduation.
Oh, what timing?
Right?
Timely question.
Yes.
One of the things that's happened in the I-91 shop hop in the past is that individual stores have had different kits or designs based on a theme. And this year, with everything going on, it's sort of up to the stores whether they're going to be doing anything. Is Webb's going to be putting together something for participants?
Yes, so we have a hat kit we're putting together. It's a 2-color hat, and it's made out of our Sunderland, which is a nice worsted weight. It's a beautiful yarn. It's super soft against your skin. It's a really cute hat. I don't want to give any more details. Okay. It's kind of a little bit of we like to keep a little surprise.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie, for taking the time to sit with me and tell me about the store.
I really appreciate it, Anne. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Bonnie. It was so fun to talk to you. Let's get us up the road with a song. This is Tom Goldstein with Nothing Can Stop Me.
Trouble for letting this take too long, deciding what's wrong or right for me. I'm in trouble for letting time ever hold on, making me go on with no time to think. But I don't know yet, come to think about it, I've been so blind trying not to see. But now I know, yeah, when I think about it, that now nothing can stop me. Yeah, now nothing can stop me from making it all come true. Trouble, your time has passed, I'm too strong, I'm too excited for you to come along and blow my bubble and let my puzzle crumble. I've worked too hard on this for you to change my mind. I hope when I'm older I look back upon this It won't be just another mistake I made. I know I'll be prouder to know I've tried. So now nothing can stop me. Yeah, now nothing can stop me from making it all come true.
I am in hand knits, and if you want to imagine the space for a moment, it's an old storefront from, I don't know, mid-1800s, early 1900s, where you have the big, beautiful windows at the front, and then the space is a longer, narrower spot where you can imagine, I don't know, I have no idea what this would have been 100 years ago, but it certainly has that feel with the wooden floors and the high ceilings, and the beautiful old ceiling tiles are still here. And if you come to the left, one thing I absolutely love in yarn shops is when they have an area devoted to local makers, and that's what you find here. Over on this left-hand side of the shop, there's a large selection of Wonderland yarns, which is a Vermont-based hand dyer, and a lot of the other shops also had Wonderland yarns, but this I think might be the best selection of the shops that I've seen. There's also some local buttons available, and then the Olan Gras is a hand dyer from New Hampshire, and there's a nice selection of those yarns here too. There's also some alpaca. Oh, anytime I touch alpaca, you have to make that sound. There's a selection of yarns here from Wildwood Acres Alpacas that are all in natural colors. And moving to the other side of the shop, there is some Kramer Mach roving here that is available by the ounce or by the pound. Some of you who have listened to the podcast before are aware that I did a review of the Kramer Mach yarns, which I really liked as an alternative to a Lopi. So here, for those of you who spin, she also has the roving here available. And then there's a very nice selection going down the side of the store of different brands of some of the more widely known hand-dyed yarn. There's Mrs. Crosby, there's Malabrigo, there's Dream, Madeline Tosh, more Dream and more Mrs. Crosby. So you have the DK fingering towards the front, and then you get back here into the worsted and the bulkies. There's a nice display here of the Wool Addicts yarn. There's quite a nice selection actually of Wool Addicts. I feel like Wool Addicts is a way that a lot of people get started with knitting. They have a lot of beginner friendly projects, but there's actually a whole lot here available if you want to get your hands on some and actually feel it before you try knitting with it. So moving down the store, you start getting into the shelving, and there's Barocco and Rowan. There's some Spud and Chloe here, always fun to see. And coming towards the back, there's a little sitting area for people. Bring your knitting and spend some time with the owner. There's also a nice selection of the Plymouth Galway worsted here. One of the yarns I've been seeing on the yarn crawl is a organic cotton called Appalachian. I've been seeing it sold mostly in kits, but there's some available loose here. It's a sport weight, earth-friendly dyed U.S. organic cotton yarn, and a lot of the kits are designed for baby projects, but this is also available loose, and it's in denim, natural, and then a few soft shades as well. So I'm going to see if I can find the owner and have a little chat with her. So I'm here with Bethel Gary, the owner of Hand Knits in Brattleboro, Vermont. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thank you for being here.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of the local yarns that you have here in the shop. The first one, let's talk about Wildwood Acres Alpacas. It looks like they are a Vermont grower.
She has her own flock of alpacas. They're up in Newfane, which is our county seat. I'm not sure where she's spinning them at the moment, but she was spinning them up in Randolph, Vermont. Okay. And then anything that's dyed, she dyes at her home. And it's a very local thing.
And then the other is a hand dyer named Olan Gra. Mm-hmm. And again, yours is the first shop I've seen it in, so I'd love to hear more about their work.
She's a small dyer in Ashwellet, New Hampshire, mm-hmm. which is about 3 towns into New Hampshire from here. She dyes and she sells on Etsy. She sells here. She does a few small local venues, and I believe she also sells at Harrisville.
How long has the shop been here?
We've been in this location for 6 years. Before this, we were up in Wilmington, which is like 20 miles west. We unfortunately were flooded out during Tropical Storm Irene, but before we were in Wilmington, we moved up here from New Jersey. So we started in 2000 in Hoboken, New Jersey. Then I moved to Englewood, New Jersey. Then we moved to Vermont. So we've been sort of puttering around here and there for over 20 years.
And you had the yarn store in New Jersey, or did you?
Yes, absolutely.
And what was it that made you take the leap into running a yarn shop?
I have sort of a checkered work history. I worked as a graphic designer in New York City for about 10, 11, 12 years. I went back to school and got a BFA in crafts at University of the Arts in Philly. And I was a potter for a few years, but I always sort of knit on the side. Mm-hmm. And the pottery thing was kind of killing my body. And so I wanted to do something where I didn't have to do craft shows anymore, because that was just killer. And I could still be creative, and I always loved color. And one day I was in Barnes & Noble, and I noticed that there was it wasn't just one or two magazines. There were all these other knitting magazines there. And I was like, wow, this must be becoming a thing. I'm not alone. So I started looking into it and decided to do it. And I took Vogue Knitting and Interweave, and this is sort of before the internet was a big thing. And I dissected them for all the yarns that were being used in patterns in the magazines, and, just kind of, started calling companies and talking to reps, and went on from there.
That's fascinating. I love your method for how to get into it, grab the magazine and just figure out what's going on.
This was also 20 years ago, and while there was an internet, I recall it making all kinds of crazy noises before it turned on. So I today I wouldn't necessarily do that, because the magazines aren't nearly the thing they were back then. Yeah. I visited some stores and kind of made some decisions about what I wanted to be and what I didn't want to be, and kind of went on from there. But today I would definitely use the internet a whole lot more.
But I like the idea of seeing what patterns are being presented to people and what yarns are they using. Mm-hmm. So it's not just I like this and hope that there will be pattern support out there for it. You actually went about it a little more logically than that.
Yeah. And I didn't necessarily, I kind of sussed reps out as to who I thought was being more straightforward and honest with me. And, what does the rep knit? Did they seem kind of too eager to sell me a whole lot of something? There was a little bit of that going on. And I developed some goofy ways for dealing with them. I would wear pantyhose and heels so that I would purposefully not relax. So that was, I just kind of did some goofy stuff that way. Yeah, so it's been a long, strange trip, sort of.
That's hilarious. I love that mental trick on yourself to just stay on your toes, put on pantyhose and heels, you know?
Well, if you've got that elastic digging into the waist, it kind of is like, yeah, that's nice, but I'm in pain, so. And I don't think I need that.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, you are located in Brattleboro. You're one of if you're on the map, you're either the first or second, or you're the last or next to last, depending on how people attack the hop. And so a lot of people are going to be starting or ending here. And Brattleboro has changed so much. I'm actually from just over the Massachusetts border, so I'm familiar with Brattleboro from, the 80s and early 90s. It's very different now than it was then. Do you have any recommendations of places people could grab a meal before or after, or anything else they should check out?
Sure. There's a great bead shop on Main Street, just around the corner. And if you ask to go down into their basement, they have a bead museum that they'll let you go look at, which is really cool because the couple that owns it really collect beads besides being a bead store. And then in the back, to kind of help pay the rent, they have this really cool toy store. So that's a really cool shop. For lunch, we have this amazing falafel place. It's not open Monday through Wednesday. They're only open Thursday through Sunday. It's run by this Israeli guy. He makes everything from scratch, and the pita is just mind-blowing. And he's there every morning. Sometimes if you get there early, they're still hot.
Can you think of the name or where it is in relation?
Yala. And then sometimes they're open for lunch. I'm not really sure their schedule. Right down the street from me is a very good fish and chips place. Okay. And supposedly Amy's, which is a bakery cafe on Main Street, will be reopening in July. It was wonderful. If you got a sandwich, the bread was made there. They've got a sourdough that's been going a long time. They have 2 homemade soups every day. I don't know if it's going to be the same exactly or not. And then there's the Works, which is kind of like a Panera.
So there's a lot available to people coming through. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for letting me come be in your shop today and for answering some questions.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming.
Beth, thanks again for meeting with me. It was a joy to be in your shop. We're moving on to Green Mountain Spinnery now for our very last stop on the shop hop. Enjoy. I am at Green Mountain Spinnery. This is the last stop for me because I'm working the trail from the south to the north. I'm just standing outside the shop here, and I'm going to do a little description because I've been here several times before. I quite like Green Mountain Spinnery yarns, and it's always a nice excuse to come up to Vermont, even in the summertime. I love Vermont in the summertime, and so if I need to come when everything is green and the sun is shining and the sky is blue with big white puffy clouds in it, so I can buy some wool when it's, 80 degrees or whatever, I'll do that. I love me some wool, and I love Vermont in the summertime. So Green Mountain Spinnery, it is a large, I would say like a good size barn size building. Not huge, but it's a nice big building, and where you enter is actually into the shop where they carry all of the yarns that they spin here at the spinnery. Well, not all, the ones that they spin for themselves, because the spinnery actually processes wool for a lot of the various smaller yarn companies that are based in the New England area. All of the yarns are in cubbies along the walls. They have some samples knit up for you to get your hands on. But I also just love the area outside of the shop. It's just surrounded by enough trees to be comfortable. You still get some dappled sunlight coming through, and they do have some picnic tables around in case you want to have a snack here, or if you're finishing up your shop hop, you could pull up to one of the picnic tables and have a little picnic lunch. Out in the front, now this is a spinnery. They do process the fleeces here all the way through to yarn. So out front there is a skirting table. And I'm sort of here on the porch right now before I go in, and there is a delightful sheepy smell coming out from the spinnery, which is just off the shop. And I know right now, due to COVID, they're not letting people back, but typically you can get in and they will give you a little mill tour and show you all the equipment that they have and how it works, and it's really enjoyable. So I would suggest, if that's not going by the time that the shop hop is happening, to call and set up a time to do that, because it really is worth it. But I'm going to go in now and have a talk. I'm here with Kate at Green Mountain Spinnery, and we are standing in the back where we are surrounded by fleeces right now, and we're going to take a little tour through the process. Kate, thank you so much for taking the time.
It's my pleasure. I love sharing this part of the process with folks.
Can you give us some of the background of the spinnery itself before we start?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the spinnery got started in 1981. There were a couple of local fiber enthusiasts who were in a book club together, and they were reading an economics book called Small is Beautiful, which talks a little bit about how small businesses can provide specific important links between different parts of different communities. And they thought by creating a mill here, we could create an important economic and manufacturing link between farmers who are raising fiber in the area and people interested in using that fiber for yarn.
I think a lot of people don't really think about Vermont as being a fiber producing state these days, but there's many people raising sheep, and alpaca have become more popular.
I think farms that have been owned by families for generations, younger folks aren't interested in taking care of the farm, and so they're more interested in heading to the city and doing different kinds of work. And so older folks who have been in this business for many years struggle to find the next generation of people to take over that work. And so I have found while living here that there's sort of a regular back to the land thing that happens in Vermont. And so, sort of every 10 or 15 years, a new group of idealistic young folks come from urban areas and are eager to get back to a more agrarian lifestyle. And they start small homesteads and small farms. And happily, the scale of our machinery is such that while we can't spin individual fleeces, we can make a batch of yarn with just 20 pounds of fiber, which is like 5 to 6 sheep, depending on their age, breed, and gender, which is a small enough flock for many people to manage. And so we're able to help those smaller fiber producers focus on their small little piece of the puzzle. And in many cases, a lot of these guys are raising heritage breed animals, which is exciting. And so it's fostering this boost of the genetic diversity in sheep. And so everybody wins.
Some of the local yarns in some of the other shops along the shop hop are actually processed here at Green Mountain Spinnery.
It's very likely 70% of the yarn that we produce is not ours. Mm-hmm. So most of what we make is for these small producers or dyers, weavers. Sometimes yarn stores have us make special bases for them. So we spin for all kinds of people.
Yeah. The spinnery itself now is an employee-owned co-op, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we're a worker-owned cooperative. There's about a dozen of us that work here part-time, and 5 of those are the worker owners, and they make all the decisions.
Very cool. So as I said, we're already back here in the barn, and I just want to sort of lean back into this giant sack of fleece behind me. Let's go ahead and start a tour through the process.
Sure. Yeah. We are a woolen spun mill, which is dictated by the kind of machinery that we have here, specifically our carding machine. And we spin primarily wool. So all of the yarns that we make for our retail customers have at least 50% wool in them. And part of that is because our machinery can't process longer fibers easily. But by blending those fibers, we can sort of trick it into managing to work with them. So for the yarns that you'll find in our shop, we have combinations of wool with alpaca, with mohair, which is the fiber from Angora goats, but Angora fiber comes from rabbits. Right. Cotton, which we get from a co-op in Texas that raises it organically, and tencel, which is a wood pulp product similar to rayon. It's created in a closed loop, so it has fewer chemical consequences And I think that's everything. But the people that we spin for are raising a much broader range of fibers. So we also have been known to spin yak. We've spun bison. We have worked with Angora. I'm not sure about llama. And we once, in our opinion, rather unsuccessfully, spun some husky.
Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah. There was a competitor in the Iditarod who wanted a sweater from her team. So we created some yarn, but it has a really hard time getting through our machinery. So we have not spun with dog fiber since. But a lot of people ask us about that.
I would imagine it's more of a hair than a wool.
I think so. Yeah, exactly.
I assume this is where the farmers bring their clips, or do you go pick it up from them, or how does that work?
No, people typically drop it off. We also get large shipments delivered to us. We're one of the only organic spinneries in the U.S., so we actually have people sending us fiber from as far away as Northern California because they don't have closer options available to them. So yeah, you'll see here like containers of all kinds, all tagged with farm names on them. And then in the way back, I'd like to draw your attention to the brightly colored big bales of wool. We don't do any dyeing at this facility. We don't have the water and we don't have the space, as you will see shortly. So all of the beautiful colors that you will see or do see in the yarn in our shop is created by blending this bale dyed fiber in various combinations with undyed fiber. And it's almost like mixing house paint. We're able to combine them in different ratios to create almost any color you could think of.
So where is the dyeing taking place?
So that takes place down in the Pennsylvania and Philadelphia area. So fiber is sent down there to be scoured and dyed, and then it comes back up here, and we have a small little spectrum of maybe a dozen really bright, obnoxious colors.
Yeah, that's very vivid blue back there.
Yeah. But you can't make it brighter, but you can tone it down.
Right. Now, I noticed there is a skirting table out front. So is some of that happening here? The scouring's happening elsewhere, but some of it's happening.
Most of the scouring, particularly of like the giant bale that's right behind you, that you want to jump into, in that large capacity, those large scales, that is happening elsewhere. You'll see our scouring department is very small, and it is sort of the blocking point of our production cycle. There's only so much fiber that we can get through that room. And so for the larger batches of yarn that we make, we do use scoured wool, but often it is blended with other fibers that we clean here. And so most of the custom processing that we do is raw fleece that's delivered here that we clean here. We also clean the alpaca here in a washing machine in the back, and so it's a messy business.
Yeah. So what's the next step then?
The next step is scouring. Before we leave, I will encourage you to experience a tactile difference between raw wool and cleaned wool.
Okay.
So I'm going to grab a handful from the bag over here. So this is raw fleece.
You can feel the lanolin is still in it, and there's vegetable matter and probably some other stuff in there still. Yep. It's yellowish still, again, probably from the lanolin. And we have gray areas from
that could
dirt.
Also be sun damage.
Oh, okay.
So the clip is probably like that. That's the newest fiber, and that's the dirty fiber that was on the outside of the animal.
So it's about 2 inches long, 3 inches long, and the top half is got all the dirt on it from being in contact with the outside world. Yeah. And then we have a beautiful creamy inner part where it's so clear in here. Even in the dim barn, you can see the crimp on the fiber.
Yeah. Now, in contrast, you can bury your hands in that bale that you wanted to dive into, and
get my chance.
That is scoured wool. So that is wool that is now a uniform creamy color. It still has sections with that fun crimp that you can see in it, but it's also delightfully soft, very clean, and it's not coating our hands with that sticky lanolin anymore. So that sticky lanolin, as much as we love it for our manicures, it does have a tackiness that proves problematic for our machinery. So the lanolin does need to be removed. And just in case you were wondering, we typically do not try to capture that lanolin.
Oh, okay.
As part of our scouring process. Typically, the fleeces that arrive here are in rustic shape, in the sense that the lanolin that comes off of them would need to be very heavily processed in order to be clean enough for any kind of cosmetic purpose. And we don't have the bandwidth to manage that project.
That makes sense.
So our priority instead is to capture the water. And so we capture, filter, and reuse our wash water during the week, trying to minimize our impact and our resource use in the area, and also minimize the sketchy stuff that would be going down into our septic system. Let's head into scouring. You guys are going to experience the dull roar of the background noise of the mill. I hope that you'll still be able to hear us. So let's go see.
Yeah, let's try it. Wow. Hey, welcome to the scouring department. So you see here the messiest but most intriguing part of the mill. We were lucky enough to receive the class project of 2 young engineering students. And they helped us build this scouring train, helping us figure out how to shoehorn what should be about 40 feet of equipment into about 6 feet. So the fiber gets soaked in very, very hot water in the sink in the back. It's about 140 degrees. And that heat helps separate the lanolin away from the fiber, taking much of the dirt away with it. But we have to be careful because when you combine wool, heat, water, and agitation, you get felt. Yeah, so we are trying very hard not to felt the fiber at this point. So this crazy contraption actually pulls the fiber through 3 separate freshwater rinse baths. And in between each one, it's rolled in between these rollers that are compressed using the braking system from trucks. So the fiber gets rinsed and squeezed several times until it pops out at the end. From here, it goes into our extractor. This beast is an old washing machine. It's cast iron and was built in 1898. It was rescued from the basement of a hotel in Bellows Falls where it was doing linens for many generations. For us, it allows us to rinse the fiber one more time and to spin it out. And that centrifugal force pulls enough water out of the fiber that, believe it or not, we can put it in this industrial dryer behind you here and not worry about felting. So from here, the fiber either goes directly into production or it goes into the back for storage until we're ready to start working with it. The mill processes fiber in cycles of about 2,500 pounds, moving from organic and light colors through darks and colors, at which point we disassemble the carding machine. It takes 2 guys about 2 days to clear the whole thing out with hand carding machines. Then we reassemble it and start the whole process over again. And that's to keep the whites white and the colors from all blending together in the process.
Exactly. It means that we don't have to clean out the carding machine in between each batch. We allow a certain portion of each batch to be run through as waste of the batch following it. The next machine up is our picker. Underneath this great big metal hood are rows and rows of about inch-long metal teeth that comb through the fiber. This machine allows us to start the blending process. So when we're making a yarn that's a combination of different fibers or different colors or all of those things, this machine helps us start that process. So we can weigh out the ingredients of our yarn and the scale behind you, layer it all like a lasagna on the floor here, and start feeding it through the machine. The fiber gets sort of teased apart and broken down into smaller pieces that'll be better managed by our very picky carding machine. The fiber goes through a tube in the wall into a storage closet at the end of the hallway. The guys who run the carding machine will typically run fiber through this little system 2 or 3 times until they assess that it's ready and it's fully blended and ready to go to the card. So they'll just grab great big armloads of it using garden rakes and bring it down to this end of the hallway and feed it right back through again. The last time the fiber goes through this machine, we add a little bit of spinning oil, which is typically organic vegetable oil, and that coating of oil is going to facilitate the fibers travel through our card, which is where it's headed next. So this great big beast has been assembled from various parts of different machinery that were retrieved from abandoned mills around New England. The front part of this machine was built in 1951, but the larger wheels that you'll see here and further back are both over 100 years old. The fiber gets picked up and pulled up on those sort of bed of nails up and over into a bucket that has a counterbalance on it that we can adjust. So it deposits, once it gets full, once it clicks that counterbalance, it drops its load onto the belt below, and the fiber gets pulled into all of these crazy rolls.
Which really look like a series of like hand carders, or not hand carders, but the hand cranked carders, only there's a whole lot of them.
Yeah. So they are covered, believe it or not, in fabric, tape, that has those metal teeth embedded in it. And you'll see that the length and texture and consistency of those teeth will change through the machine, so they will get longer and finer as we go. And these smaller rolls will show you, they'll illustrate the limitations of the fiber length that this machine can handle. If we put in fibers that are longer than the circumference of that smallest roll, it will felt in place and it won't continue past.
So what is that, 5-6 inches, 7 inches?
We prefer to work with fiber between about 2.5 and 5 inches. So the fiber gets combed out by passing past, it sort of just brushes past the surface of all of these teeth, and it all gets combed out so it's all in alignment, and it also further blends it. Halfway down is an important component of our machine, which dictates the woolen spun nature of the fiber that the roving that this machine is going to create. The fiber gets folded up, brought up and over to the second half of the machine, and it's folded sideways before it continues on. And that 90-degree change of direction means that the fibers are getting combed sort of across each other. And it ends up resulting in a really messy web-like structure that contains a lot of air and captures all those short and medium length fibers in a really random, messy construction. That air is what makes woolen spun yarn so elastic and so lofty. So right before the fiber gets separated, it comes off that last roll, and it's so fragile it's transparent. So it just takes a sequence of leather belts that shred it into straps that are then fed by those belts in between rubber aprons. Those rubber aprons jostle against one another just a little bit to create enough friction to twist that strand that's about 3/4 of an inch across into the pencil roving that's the finished product of this machine.
Wow, that's amazing.
Like spaghetti.
Yes.
Today's batch looks maybe more like fettuccine.
So what are you looking at as you're doing this?
I'm looking for an end here so I can
just to
peel.
find an end,
Yep,
yeah.
peel it off so that way I can wrap all of these together.
It makes
There we
them
go.
easier for Megan, who is running the carding machine, to be able to find them and then thread the machine. So as you'll see, these strands, as delicate as they are definitely not strong enough for us to start working with for our craft. And if you take a closer look at them, you'll see that sort of messy structure that I was telling you about earlier. So those strands will end up getting fed into our carding machine. So this card has 96 bobbins on it. We can pull the strands of the individual roving, thread it through the machine. This is the piece that spins very rapidly and loudly, I might add. And that ply, once it's twisted, is already much, much stronger. This ends up winding itself around bobbins that are spun by the machine, by belts, and the whole bottom arm of the machine moves up and down, bobbing the bobbins, and thus winding the plies around it almost like a spool of thread so it's not all stuck in one spot. We can combine several strands of the roving to be twisted by the machine into a single ply of various sizes. So by combining multiple strands, we can create a range of single plies that go from a lace weight or a fingering weight all the way up to a bulky, which could have as many as 6 strands being twisted together.
And that all happens here.
Yep, exactly. So the plies get wound around these bobbins, and the bobbins are then transferred into a steam box where they're steamed for 2 hours. And that steaming helps set the twist. So all the energy that the machine puts into the fiber sort of gets memorized, kind of like curling your hair.
Or like blocking your sweater.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Around the corner, this is one of our steam carts. Our steam box is in the corner there. Okay. And here I've got a bobbin of 2-ply yarn. So you can see that there's 2 strands that are visibly twisted around one another. So bobbins of the single plies are mounted on our plying frame. They are then twisted in the opposite direction by this machine onto fresh bobbins that would need to be steamed again for another 2 hours. We can do any number of plies. The number of plies doesn't necessarily dictate the size or the gauge of the yarn.
Right, because your plies over here, you're setting them at different sizes.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
So at this point, we need to get the yarn off the bobbins. So we've got a skeining machine here that twists them off into skeins. We can do as many as a dozen at a time. We also have a very ancient and loud coning machine that allows us to wind the yarn onto cardboard cones, which is typically a put-up that weavers prefer. So last but not least, you see some skeins here that are drying. Now, many people visiting the mill think that these have been freshly dyed, but instead they've actually been freshly washed. We like to wash our skeins to remove that fine coating of spinning oil that we added to the fiber, and we do that by soaking them in hot water with a little bit of eucalyptus. That adds just a touch of lanolin back to the yarn. These guys will then air dry until they're ready, and then we twist and label them up and make them ready for sale.
That's amazing. And the amount of space that this is happening in, like, I'm not even sure what I would compare it to right now. It's not a huge factory, though.
It's not. It was at one point a gas station.
Yeah, maybe like a 3 or 4 bay garage. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you so much for that tour. That was amazing.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Just for my listeners, is there anything coming up on the calendar for Green Mountain Spinnery?
We have a number of sheep and wool festivals that we'll be attending. Believe it or not, the first one in our fall season is out in Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
I know. So, if you guys want a road trip, it's really fun. Or you could just tell friends and family if they're living out in that area. We're going to be by Jefferson, which I believe is in between Milwaukee and Madison. And it's a really fun kind of 4-H kind of fiber festival. So we have a lot of fun at that one. Then in the beginning of October is the Vermont Sheep and Wool Festival, which is up in Tunbridge. And then shortly after that is Rhinebeck, and we'll be there. And then a week after that, we head down to Asheville, North Carolina for SAF, the Southeastern Animal Fiber Festival, I think. I'm not quite sure exactly what SAF stands for.
I'll look it up, and if it's not that, I'll put it in the show notes.
So we have a busy fall ahead of us.
How does that work? Who ends up going to these, or do you take turns going to be at these festivals?
Typically 2 of us, Maureen and I, do a sort of Thelma and Louise road trip without the, jump off the cliff at the end. We just fill a giant van full of as much yarn as we could possibly carry, and we set up a booth that, believe it or not, is larger than our shop here at the mill, typically.
Yeah, I've seen it at Vogue Knitting Live. It is a nice space. Yeah, compared to in there, it's like twice the size, I think, to the shop that's actually here.
Yep. So it's actually kind of nice because it allows us to spread out a little bit.
Yeah.
And then for Rhinebeck, because our booth is on the small side for us, since it's only 10 feet square, so it's smaller than our shop here, we often bring another 1 or 2 people with us just to run back and forth between our little booth and our van, restocking us as people buy the yarn.
Yeah, because Green Mountain Spinnery is very well known and highly regarded. So I can imagine that with a smaller booth, you are having to do those restocks. And that's wonderful to hear that that's going on.
Well, it's perfect for sweaters. And I feel like Rhinebeck has sort of become defined by the Rhinebeck sweater, and so it is a festival that is uniquely focused on sweater knitting, and so larger quantities of yarn typically move out of our booth there.
Awesome. Let's get that wool out the door. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today.
It was my pleasure.
Kate, you are a fount of knowledge. Thank you again for taking the time to take us through the process of turning fiber into yarn. And that's that. I have heard from a few of you that you are planning on giving the I-91 shop hop a try this time. I think that's great. Again, the dates are August 10th through the 21st. To do the hop, just go into one of the participating stores. It's $5 for an awesome thick canvas tote bag. And you get a paper map of the hop. Visit all the shops and you'll be entered in a grand prize giveaway. I love yarn and yarn stores and New England in the summer, so this is like the perfect event for me. I hope you decide to give it a try sometime. Or if it's really not in the cards because of where you're listening from, I hope you have been inspired to try out a yarn crawl closer to home. Green Mountain Spinnery is sponsoring the last giveaway of this series of episodes celebrating the I-91 shop hop. It's a Green Mountain Spinnery tote with a hank of their Vermont organic 2-ply worsted weight wool and a copy of the At the Spinnery pattern book, full of patterns designed for Green Mountain Spinnery yarns. To enter, look for the post about the giveaway on my Instagram feed and follow the directions there to enter. Or, of course, if you're not on Instagram, send me an email to ann@ithoughtIknewhow.com with the subject line Green Mountain and include your mailing address in the body of the email. Get your entries in by midnight Pacific time on August 9th, and I will announce the winner on August 10th. A few more things before I go. First, I am going to be teaching at Shetland Wool Week this year. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by this myself. I was invited by Uradale Yarns to teach a beginner Fair Isle class. We will be knitting a pair of fingerless gloves designed by Hilly Vandersluis using Uradale Yarns. The class is called Makkin In Shetland Dialect and will be taught over 2 2-hour sessions. The first will be on Monday, September 27th. The second will be on Thursday, September 30th. The classes will both take place from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 4 to 6 p.m. UK time. We picked that time because we thought, West Coast people, you'll still be able to get up early enough to do that class. And people in Europe, you should be able to stay up late enough to do that class. So some of us, it's going to be middle of the day. Others, it's going to be bedtime or just getting up. But we wanted to pick a time that would sort of cover as many people as we possibly could. This really is a beginner Fair Isle class. So if you have knit Fair Isle before, I suggest that you wait for the virtual Shetland Wool Week offerings to be made public and choose a different class to sign up for. That said, to take this class, you will need to have yarn mailed to you from Uradale. So the tickets for this class are either already available at uradale.com or they will be going live in the next day or two. That link is uradale.com. I'll put a link in the show notes to their website as well. But also, if you follow I Thought I Knew How or Uradale Yarn on Instagram, we will be posting there when the tickets go live. In the first session of the class, we will talk about casting on and knitting in the round on double-pointed needles and how to knit corrugated ribbing and how to change colors. Then Vivica will present her talk about the Shetland dialect. In the second class, we will learn how to knit Fair Isle, and Vivica will talk about the organic and environmentally positive methods they use to raise Uradale yarns. Before we say goodbye, I will show you a nice stretchy bind-off so your mitts fit you comfortably. I know Uradale is also planning to offer a 2-part natural dyeing class with Maria Muscarella and a class in one session on thrummed mittens with Helene Dreisen. So watch for the tickets for those to go on sale too. Next week, we will be hearing from Tracy Hawkins, one of the volunteers who is putting together the virtual Shetland Wool Week experience for us, so keep an ear out for that. Finally, at some point earlier in the day that this episode was released, the second episode of That Knitting Show should have gone live on YouTube. Find it by searching for That Knitting Show on YouTube. This time, Erin and I filmed the episode at Morehouse Farm, so you'll get to meet one of the lambs born earlier this year, and we talk about all sorts of things woolly. I'll be back next week, friends. Enjoy your knitting in the meantime. Thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/IThoughtIKnewHow to make a monthly pledge. You may also consider making a purchase from one of our sponsors by visiting the website IThoughtIKnewHow.com and clicking the link at the top that says Be a Booster. While you are on the site, you can also find the show notes for each episode. Thank you ever so much to my patrons, to Knit New Haven, and to Morehouse Farm for sponsoring the podcast. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.